Welcome to Taking the Tradition On, a series of conversations about traditional oral storytelling with exceptional people. We are currently on series 4. This is the last one in the series, in series 4, Words in the Works, a series about applied storytelling. We've had amazing conversations this year. We've covered storytelling in archaeology, storytelling in libraries, storytelling in the world service, and many more. And tonight's edition is going to be storytelling and the environment. All the previous episodes from this series and the previous 3 are up on the YouTube channel, Taking the Tradition On, so you can go and peruse those at your leisure. And they're all freely available. And if you enjoy them, please do subscribe, press that button, because it's quite helpful for other people finding it. And as always, I would like to thank my fantastic patrons. Cecilia, it's very lovely to have you in the room tonight, one of my best and most faithful patrons. And those are the people who really help to make that, help make Taking the Tradition On happen. And if you'd like to join them, you would be very welcome. So, my guest tonight is a rather special person. She's a storyteller, environmentalist, conservationist, activist and author. She's worked in conservation for over 25 years as a river surveyor, as a political lobbyist, as a farm advisor. But during that time, her work as a storyteller became more and more important, and she's become more and more accomplished and amazing as a storyteller, and finally made the choice a couple of years ago to become a full-time professional storyteller and author. She's got 3 best-selling books out. I happen to have one of them to hand. River Folktales, very close to my heart. River Folktales of Britain and Ireland, but also Woodland Folktales of Britain and Ireland, and Botanical Folktales of Britain and Ireland, all available from the History Press or any good independent lovely bookshop. So, welcome to my completely fabulous guest, Lisa Schneidau. Please go mad on the chat, whoop and go crazy for Lisa Schneidau. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Amy. That was really impressive. I can just turn around and go now. I think it's fine.
Well, I've said all the nice things about you, and now I'm going to give you a grilling. I'm usually very nice to my guests on Taking the Tradition On, and I probably will be quite nice to you because I do really like you. But this, well, most of the topics we cover here are quite close to my heart because that's why I choose them. I'm quite a selfish person. I do this for the love of it, and I do tend to do things that I'm interested in with people that I'm interested in as well. But storytelling in conservation is one of those topics that to me feels quite controversial, and it's in that it's something that everybody does, and I'm not entirely sure how effective it always is. So that's one of the big things that we are going to be talking about tonight. But not everybody here has met you, not everybody knows who you are, and I think the people here maybe that do know you as a storyteller. So would you mind starting with a brief potted history of your work in conservation and what roles you fulfilled, what you feel your main achievements have been, and what maybe major frustrations of working in that industry have been?
I'll try and be quick because we could fill an evening with these things, but
well, I do appreciate,
I think for me,
fitting 25 years into 5 minutes is a little bit tricky, but you know, give it your best shot.
Yeah, I mean, it probably starts for me, like I think it starts for most people, with an experience of nature when they were little. And I was very lucky with that. You probably start with me when I was about 4, when the moon daisies were taller than me, when the meadows behind the house were like a little adventure playground. And I think one of the things that really affected me when I was little, when I was about 10 years old, that field was ploughed up. All of the fields were ploughed up. They were drained. Everything was wrecked. And I often return to that moment. I did a degree in biological sciences. I did a master's in ecology. I came out like most graduates thinking I could save the world. It was the early 90s. It was the green time. You remember when everyone talked about green things, and there were protests going on all over the place, and there was the Earth Summit. I ended up working in nature conservation rather than other forms of environmental work. And there is a huge array of need for work on environmental issues, everything from carbon emissions and water quality right the way through. But for me, it was all about nature. And it was all about trying to get those who manage the land, those who own and manage the land, to leave more space for nature. So my first proper job was as a farmer advisor in Norfolk, 90s, going out, organising otter survey out and advising on wildflower meadow kind of work. I went from there to running a national otter project all over the country. I think we had 22 different otter officers. This was at a point when otters were starting to come back to the rivers in England. And we did have a couple of project officers in Wales as well. That was really interesting, using that project as a way of getting landowners interested in their rivers. And it seems like a world away now, the situation we were working in. But I went from there to being a lobbyist in Scotland. I headed up the campaigns unit of the Scottish Wildlife Trust, and this was just after the Scottish Parliament had formed. So I suddenly found myself briefing SPADs, being in committee rooms, feeding amendments to different parties. This was at a point when Labour and Lib Dem were in coalition in Scotland. The SNP was in opposition. The Tories were hardly anywhere to be seen. And a huge amount of experience about why decisions really are made. But when it started to get to the point where I was getting excited about the word environment appearing in a bit of legislation, I was thinking, how useful is this? And I wanted to get back down south. I wanted to move to the southwest. And so I ended up being head of conservation at Somerset Wildlife Trust, which was a small organisation in a county with a lot of challenges. The Somerset Levels, the Mendip Hills. Stayed there for about 7 years or so, and ended up moving down to Devon. And the last job I did in conservation was running a thing called the Nature Improvement Area, which was a result of a government review into nature conservation called the Lawton Review that was done in 2010. That said that conservation wasn't doing well enough. It didn't have enough resources. It wasn't doing enough in the wider countryside. The government at that time, the just about coalition government, decided they were going to do a series of pilots of landscape scale work right the way across communities. And so I ended up heading up a whole team on the River Torridge in Devon, the Tarka the Otter River, one of them. And I stayed there and gradually went part-time and part-time, because by that time storytelling had got me. And by that time I was madly running around managing projects, fundraising, managing teams of people, and storytelling and writing, and I couldn't do it all. And so I followed my heart. I decided I needed a change, and here I am.
How difficult a decision was that to make? Because it sounds like, I mean, you got to a place where you were quite high up, and it sounded like you were actually, it might have been again in tough situations, but you were actually doing valuable work and making things happen. Or did it not feel like that, and it felt like you were just banging your head against a brick wall because there was no funding?
It felt like both of those, if I'm allowed that. I mean, I don't think, you're always learning new things in conservation because you're always meeting new people, you're always talking to new landowners, you're always developing things. But I'd been doing it for a long time, and I felt that I'd gone as far as I could in that particular area. I could have retrained and gone into a different sector in conservation. I was effective at what I did, but there was also a personal element to it here as well. There's only so many spreadsheets and so many staff meetings and so many political issues you can sort out, and so many fundraising bids you can end up putting in before you think, actually, do I really want to do that again? If I had a choice, could I be more effective somewhere else? I don't think anyone in their career is necessarily a one-trick pony. I think we all change as we go along. And I was certainly changing in my approach to the world. And I was starting to chafe at the incessant need within nature conservation to be completely scientific, totally factual, to, show peer-reviewed evidence as a way of persuading people, which is no bad thing. If I was putting a briefing together on, I don't know, the extension of nitrate vulnerable zones in southwest Scotland, I can tell I've lost you already. I would have to put an argument together based on data. Otherwise, I'm not going to be writing about the fairy folk. I'm not going to be writing about ancient folktale as a way of persuading someone to do that. But there is a huge area of our connection with the environment which is not addressed by data and information and science. We are much, much more than the physical and much more than the sum of our parts, aren't we? And so is nature, and so is our relationship with nature. And if we end up only describing that by fact and observation and science, I think we're doing nature a disservice as well as ourselves. That's probably why I left.
And so how long has it been now since you left?
It's coming round to September 2021 when I became full-time storyteller and writer. Yeah.
Now I'm having issues with your signal, and I'm really sorry if everybody else is struggling to see Lisa as well. We both live in rural areas. This is one of the things. We are both plugged into the Ethernet. We have done everything we can to get a decent signal today. So just apologies, stick with us, and hopefully it will sort itself out a little bit. There have been problems with the internet in the southwest today. And if there's anything that Lisa says that you missed, that you just, do put it up on the chat and ask her to just say it again. So it's 21 you left, 2021.
Yeah.
So a year and a half. And you...
Yeah, getting on for a couple of years. Mm-hmm.
And when you were talking about it, you said that you just felt there were ways that you could be more effective. So in this year and a half since you've left, do you feel that you are scratching that need, that you are achieving that? Are you achieving things that you couldn't do as a conservationist? Are you starting to feel more effective?
I hope that I'm starting to be effective in a different way. It's very difficult to measure effectiveness. I think that in this kind of work, as in everything else, everyone finds their place and they try their best to make a little bit of difference. But it's not just about the individual, is it? And the further, this is the annoying thing, the further away we get from achieving things that we might be able to measure empirically, I don't know, hectares of wildflower meadow created, for example. The further away we get from that towards culture and attitude and story, the more difficult it is to actually measure how much change that will result in. Carl on the call will be smiling at this point because we have had so many conversations trying to work those connections through. But I do believe that culture and the way that we look at environment and value it is a very valuable thing to be working in, even if you don't get that direct feedback. Having said that, there have been little points where I have got some feedback that things might have made a bit of a difference. I've just been working on a major schools project with a rural touring organisation in North Devon called Beeford, which has been the most wonderful experience. I must have done about 140 full teaching days over the last 3 years. So it's been a big learning for me, but watching those children change, watching their confidence increase, watching them explore their local environment and turn that into story. Watching them be curious about everything around them and ask the right questions. There's the wrong questions with even better results. That kind of thing, fantastic. Doing a storytelling at a festival a couple of years ago of a piece I did called Tangle of the Commons, which is the history of the landscape in folktale. and someone coming up to me afterwards and saying, I've just inherited some land and now I've heard your piece, I know what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to put it to nature. Things like that. That's great. That's really good. You know, I don't know how effective I should be, but I hope it's helping a bit. It's the best I can offer, I think.
Well, it's one of those tricky things, isn't it? And when I ask you these questions, I'm also asking myself them. I mean, I feel passionate about the environment, and it's one of the big things in my work that I'm trying to do more with connecting people to the landscape, with connecting I've spent my life kind of getting to know my local patch and connecting to my landscape. I mean, the land itself, as well as the nature, through stories and trying to connect other people to it. And there are days when I think, this is really important, this is the best thing that I can do in my life. And then there are other days, and maybe particularly at festivals or groups, when I look around and I go, we're a load of white middle class people who already care about the environment, who are just commiserating with each other, and we're not achieving anything, we're not getting out of our little bubble, and are we making any difference other than sort of patting each other on the back and going, aren't we doing a nice thing? So how do we, because storytelling is a small niche, and I mean, this is where you can all join in on the chat as well and tell me that I'm utterly wrong. I'm definitely sort of playing devil's advocate here, but also I do wonder that sometimes. How and it's one of the things that I've been sort of trying really hard to reach out and to get into other spaces with varying degrees of success, often not as successful as I would like. How do we reach out to people who aren't already in that sphere when we're in such a niche place? And I'm hoping that you straddle those two worlds, and that because you already have 25 years in conservation, that people know you from that and are inviting you back and getting you to kind of to balance things out, so that you are then telling the story that goes with the data, making it a little bit more humane, and reaching people that aren't going to come to a storytelling festival.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do think it is about new audiences very much. And this isn't the only sector of storytelling that should be asking those questions. Make no mistake, British nature conservation is about as white and middle class and Waitrose as you can get. It's trying really hard to change that, but it comes from that root. But I do also think that we can sit here and beat ourselves up an awful lot about this stuff. I do think that things like storytelling festivals and the storytelling world are very, very valuable places to kick stuff around, to develop things, to question those things in a safe environment. Because make no mistake, we're in a bit of a war situation at the moment. There are so many people out there telling stories about environment and about society that are deliberately misleading, that are wrong, that are destructive. And I do believe that wherever we can and wherever we get the chance to do it, no matter what our circumstance or where we're coming from, we have a duty to speak up with that truth. And if we find new audiences, and those new audiences only take us that little bit further into another area, at least we've made that effort. And I do believe it's genuinely making the effort that's really important, because as Carla's already said on the chat, it's those ripples that go outwards and outwards. I was doing a storytelling workshop at the weekend in the most gorgeous wildflower meadow about 3 or 4 miles away from here. And the owner of the farm, the manager of the farm, it was a trust, came up to me afterwards and said, I do a lot of work with inner city kids. Do you want to do some storytelling for them?
Oh, fantastic.
These little connections leading to other things, it's almost the opposite of the career I was in nature conservation, where you have to do something quite regimented. You know the prescription that will get the results. You know how to get the funding for the farmer to do the work to achieve the difference. In storytelling, it almost seems as if sometimes you're working on serendipity, you're working on connection, and you're working on opportunity that comes up through that. I think, having that intention and pushing that forward is what we'll need to do. I do beat myself up as well about that stuff. And I think it's important to hold ourselves to account. But I think we still need to keep trying.
I don't think we should, any of us should be beating ourselves up, but I just, it's not about beating, that wasn't my point. It was more about kind of, I sometimes feel that people sit back and feel a bit smug because they're on the right side of things.
Yeah.
I'm in a bit of one of those moods tonight where it's just but it's, I think it can just be, well, I'm doing my best and I do all the right things. But I also think that we really need to, all of us, get a bit shaken up, and kind of, I do care about the environment, but I also we were talking a bit about this on last time. So we were talking, I tell a lot of traveller stories and amazing stories of the land, and I really connect with those stories, and I think they're beautiful. They really help me to connect with the land. I'm not a traveller, and I would make an absolutely rubbish traveller. Duncan, who was a traveller that I travelled to 2 places with, used to just despair of me because I would always take far too much packing, and he'd be standing there waiting while I kind of carried my bag out, and he'd just be there with his tweed coat, everything he needed in his pockets, just shaking his head at me. But I would fail at that life. I like a little bit of fair weather camping. You tell those stories, and I think that there's a golden glow, and this oldie worldy, wasn't it lovely, and living on the land is flipping hard. And it's cold and it's wet, and it's, you don't sleep very well because you're always aware of things that might happen in the night, and you just have to work really hard to get by. I really like having a washing machine. I really like having a comfortable bed. I like having options of clothes. I kind of think of myself as, I don't really need that much, but actually I really do. And I think we
That's
all
a really
need
interesting thing.
a little bit of shaking up, and taking long, hard looks at all of ourselves, and being made to feel uncomfortable. I think that's the thing, is that we're all maybe a bit too comfortable, and whether that's being comfortable in going, well, I'm telling nice stories and I'm doing my bit, is that enough? It's always that, just, and I think generally for all sorts of storytelling, and for pushing yourself and becoming a more interesting and a better person, a better storyteller, anything else, you need, it's like sort of David Bowie was saying, like, kind of, if you're not slightly out of your depth, you're not learning to, you're not getting anywhere. If your feet can touch the bottom, then you're just, standing still. And so I think there's always that thing of just, you need to be a bit uncomfortable and you need to be asking questions. So I went up on a bit of a rant there.
No, it's absolutely spot on. It's fascinating from the environmental point of view that things are turned on their heads. There's a place up in North Devon, Torrington Common, around the town of Torrington, which I've done quite a lot of work at. And the town of Torrington has had it since 1100. It was given to them as waste. And what that means is the land was too poor to farm, and therefore the poor could have it for a bit of firewood and a bit of grazing, a bit of this, a bit of that. It's fascinating because Torrington Common today is the most beautiful area of regenerated woodland. Everybody loves walking their dogs there. Everyone loves going to find a bit of wild. The farmland around Torrington might be very, very intensively managed, but everything has turned on its head. People desire wild. They desire to go and be in the waste rather than trying to, they don't necessarily idolize the comforts and the technology. They idolize their life being a little bit wild or a little rough around the edges. But the notions of what wild might be they vary hugely. You'll have people wandering up on the high moor here on Dartmoor, right up on the top, going, "This is so wild." It's like, actually, no, it's not. It's a desert monoculture of purple moorgrass with not much else apart from sheep. So is that wild? No. It's pretty screwed nature. What are we going to do about it? It's a big
Well, and that's
kind
the
of
thing,
discussion
isn't it?
to have.
They think it's well because there's not very many people there. They can't.
Mm.
They have a chance to have that space and not to have people. But actually, you can have lots of people living with an awful lot of species, and it can actually be very managed, but hugely biodiverse.
Yeah, and it's that diversity that is the inspiring thing. It's like human culture. Diversity is strength, and similarly in nature. And we can have, and I think we should have the right to have, nature wherever we are, whether we're in a city or a town, or whether we're out in the countryside. There are parts of the arable east of the country that there's not much wildlife for miles. Big, very intensive arable. So, I think everybody living in those areas deserves that right. But it is bringing back that diversity. That's where the inspiration really comes in, I think. And it's very interesting to compare that to our human circumstance.
So, environmental storytelling. What can we do by telling stories for the sake of the environment? And we've been having conversations about various things over years, and I've sort of come to you kind of to pick your brains over some of my projects. And I think we have quite similar outlooks on this, and we've got different things and various things that we think we might be able to achieve. So I'm kind of interested in what your list of things that you think you might be able to achieve for the environment by telling stories are.
Okay. Can I answer you with a bit of a story? Am I allowed to do that to start with?
Please. No.
Can I give you some things afterwards?
To do that. Please do.
It's a story.
I might spotlight you first, though, and I'll get out of the way. Sit back and listen.
Here we go. It's a story I think you know, Amy. It's a story about a field. And when I first heard it, I heard Nick Hennessy tell it. I heard Taffy tell it. I heard a few tellers tell the story in a very different way. But this story, for me, begins with the field, because the field wasn't always a field, right? So the hedges that define the field only went in medieval times. And before that time, that field had an awful lot going on in it. That field happens to be one of the fields that King Arthur and his knights rode through, for example. That field happens to be one of the fields where Gog Magog the giant and Corineus and Brutus all battled a long time ago. All of those stories. The point is that it's still that land. The land remembers these things because that land has been there for a long, long time, longer than any of our memories or folk memories or stories can remember. But at some point, there were some hedges put in. And for about the last 600 years, on and off, this field has remained a field. And the reason why this field is in the story is because right to the present day, nobody has ever been able to agree who owns this field. I just want you to think about that for a moment. An ownerless piece of land, a piece of the British Isles that nobody owns. Can you imagine that? I find that very difficult to imagine. Of course, there have been people who've laid claim to it. There have been legal cases. There's been arguments within the land registry, but nothing has ever seemed to agree. There's a farm on either side of the field. The farm on one side is owned by Farmer Oak, and the hedge that divides the field and his farm is right now, it's looking absolutely beautiful. It's got so many different plants in it. It's got hazels with the hazelnuts just beginning to form. It's got hawthorn where the flowers this year have been incredible, and now they are all starting to turn to tiny berries. It's got a great oak tree. It's got an ash getting a little twiggy around the edges. It's got all manner of flowers, foxgloves just going over, coming from the bank all the way down. And Farmer Oak's farm just behind it, well, there's not really much going on that farm. There's a little bit of scrub here and a few wild flowers here. It's all looking a bit crispy. There's hens pecking around. There's a really old classic tractor, and part of it is propped up by old Hugh Fernley Whitting store cookbooks, and there's a wind chime in the window. There's all kinds of stuff going on Farmer Oak's farm, but I can't quite work out what he's doing. Over on the other side of the field, that hedge that divides the field and Farmer Ash's farm, the other farm, is a very different hedge. And I'm sorry to tell you it's already been flailed this year, even though technically you're not really allowed to flail. It has been tided. Any growth that those plants have managed to push out this year has already been cut. The bottom of the hedge has all been sprayed out with herbicide. And the other side, the field is bright green. I mean, really, it is chemical green, and there's no cattle on it. And beyond it, there is a massive cattle shed. All the cattle seem to be in that. There's a huge slurry store, filled to overflowing with the brown stuff. It's a farming story. You have to kind of take the shed. Now, you probably won't be surprised to hear that both Farmer Oak and Farmer Ash think they own the field. You probably also won't be surprised to hear that they really hate one another. They have argued over this for so many years, for decades. The local landlord in the pub won't even allow them both in the bar at the same time, because of the likelihood of fights. But you can be sure that both Farmer Oak and Farmer Ash have got a very powerful pair of binoculars on their window ledge, and they know what each other does. They probably know more about each other's lives than they know about their own. But now I've told you about the field and about the farms, I can begin my story. Because it happened only last year, round about this time of year, just after midsummer. And it was a beautiful morning. It was a bright blue sky, skylarks singing up in the air over Farmer Oak's farm. It was the most gorgeous morning. And Farmer Oak looked out of his window and he thought, I'm going for a walk this morning. I'm going for a walk on my field. And he managed to hop over the gate. And he walked all the way down. The wildflowers were up to his knees. There were butterflies everywhere. Oh, it was just stunning. And he walked over the brow of the hill down towards the river, and he was too late to stop. Because that morning, Farmer Ash had decided he was going to go for a walk in his field. And so he'd hopped over the gate the other side. He'd come up the bottom of the field, and he was just coming up over, and he bumped straight into Farmer Oak. These two had not talked to each other for decades. And here now they were face to face. They could not avoid a meeting. And of course, Farmer Oak looked straight at Farmer Ash and uttered those time-honoured words. Get off my land. What do you mean, your land? Said Farmer Ash. You know full well this field belongs to me and has belonged to my family for generations. Now go on, get out. Very nice, said Farmer Oak. Your field, eh? It's just as well you haven't got your hands on it. Didn't you know this is one of the last remaining wildflower meadows left in Devon? You are not getting your vandal little mitts on this. Go on, get out. Oh, like that, said Farmer Ash. Like that, is it? You and your bloody Waitrose ways, you and your yogurt knitting vegan friends. You don't know what you're talking about. Call yourself a farmer? You grow no food on your land. You are of no use to society or anyone. I produce food. I produce milk, for people to drink. What this field needs, he said, is a good load of slurry, a good load of drainage, then it might be useful for something. So go on, get out. I'm sorry to tell you, it wasn't long after this that the English language was failed by these two. They just started to fight. Does anyone really fight in the middle of fields anymore? It wasn't like the old days, huh? First of all, it was a bit like a play fight, and then a bit like a kind of wrestling match in the mud. And it wasn't too long before Farmer Oak had his hands around Farmer Ash's throat, and Farmer Ash had his hands around Farmer Oak's throat, and they were in some kind of deadlock. Neither of them would look away. in case the other one got the advantage. And so there they stayed, hands around each other's throats. Sun went up in the sky. Still they were. Sun went down the other side of the sky. Sun set. Darkness came. Moon came up. Owls hooting over Farmer Oak's land. Still, they did not away. They stayed there all night. They stayed there with the dew forming on them. They would not budge until the sun came up again, and with it, strange noise, kind of sounded like someone in wellies that was slightly too big for them. Coming up the field, Farmer Oak said, "I'm not looking. I'm not moving either. Tell you what, we'll both look together." And they both turned their heads. And there, looking up at them, was a little old lady. Scruffy old jacket, wellies that did look slightly too big for her, but looking up at them and just, "What on earth are you two doing?" "Well, he was on my field," said Farmer Oak. "He was on my land. I was just asking him to leave." "Your land," said Farmer Ash. "Really?" And they began to fight again. The little old lady, she just got down on her knees in the soil and the mud and the dew, and she put her ear to the ground. And she listened and she nodded a couple of times, and then she got up and wiped the mud off her hands. And now both Farmer Oak and Farmer Ash, they were staring at her. "What are you doing?" "I've asked the land for its opinion," she said. "The land says you belong to it." You know that story.
So I haven't heard it told like that before, though.
You know, I told that story to a bunch of staff at Devon Wildlife Trust a long time ago. It was at a big staff meeting. I remember the story changed the room. It was a very different place to all the kind of sciencey things we've been talking about. And someone came to find me afterwards and they said, "I know that field and I know those farmers. Have you been working in the same place?" And she thought it was true, which of course it is, isn't it?
I definitely know those farmers. I know several of both of them.
So in answer to your question, what can storytelling do for the environment? I love that little story. I've told that story to groups of farmers, some of whom have been none too impressed, and some of whom have smiled despite themselves, and everything in between. I've told that story. I've told that story to family groups when I remember a girl turning around to her dad, who was a farmer, just going, "Dad!" and thinking, "Oh no, what have I started?" That is a lovely example of a story which presents a situation. It's an extreme, ridiculous situation, isn't it? I didn't even get into the Common Agricultural Policy. You got off lightly, but it presents a situation, it shows a situation, and it gets the listener to the story questioning, because neither of those farmers are right. What is right? You know, how do we decide what happens to that field? How do we decide? Do we as a community even get the choice? Probably not. So that little story packs all of those questions into a little bundle in a way that I never could have done when I was working on farm advisory projects, because it would have been too pointed and too personal. And of course, everything is opinion. But what that story does more than anything is talks about the power of land ownership. And that's a fundamental which underlies a lot of the issues that we are trying to deal with, I reckon.
But it does also start a different way of looking at the land. And one of the things that you talk a lot about is rewilding through story. Which, as I understand it, is is about looking at non-human beings as beings. I'm not just, and I this is another thing that that's been in my head just a lot, is English is a beautiful, wonderful language, and I love telling stories through it, but it's also quite confrontational as a language. The way our language is set up is very them and us. It is he, she, and it. And that's becoming really difficult for gender conversations. But it's also in that wider context of acknowledging the spirit and presence of, and the word that I reach for there is things. But thing is a really, it carries so much weight with it, doesn't it? I don't want to describe a tree as a thing or a rock as a thing, because it carries so much lifelessness and worthlessness with it when you call something a thing. But we don't have those words. Lingit is not set up for us to think like that. And I think that the way English just sets our relationship up with the natural world is automatically disengaging the pronouns and the words that we use for things. So, and I think but anyway, this is all me, and I want to hear about your version of rewilding and bringing the life back into the non-human.
I think you're quite right about language. And I think that we have, all of us, grown up with a mindset where once we've named something, we own it. And there's a lot to think about and unpack there. But I would go beyond that. We are only one of millions of species, and yet we have again been brought up in a culture where we are encouraged to have dominion of those species, religions who have told us that those are there for our use and disposal and abuse. And I think that it's got so far now that we don't really even question that. We do live in our own little worlds, in our own little bubble that we get used to. We create our safe space. And very often in that, our environment is a backdrop. And few of us are encouraged or educated or brought up to be with the environment on a regular basis, to have regular contact with nature in our everyday lives, in our routines, not just for weekends. It's something which needs to be built into our everyday lives all the time. And I think that is reflected in our language. And I think that is also reflected in our storytelling.
It's a lovely word, isn't it? Scenery.
Yeah, great, isn't it? Yeah, landscape, even though landscape is lots of other things. But yeah, the number of storytellers, I've been one of them. Our heroine walks into the dark woods. It's like a code for mild peril. What kind of woods? What's going on? What does it sound like? What's the temperature? I want to know what kind of trees there are there. I want to know what kind of beasts are lurking. I want that place to come alive with that diversity described by the storyteller, even if only a few very well chosen words. I want the non-human represented in that story just as much as the human. And it's often impossible to get any notion of what kinds of pictures you might be painting in someone else's minds. But if we as storytellers don't start painting in the non-human as well as the human, we're not encouraging others to make those connections either. If we don't start reconnecting those stories with the land that they came from and imagining those in the current day and helping those stories be alive with the nature of now, or the nature we would like to be there, then I don't think we're being of service to the environment as storytellers. So there's some, and I would include myself in this. I work really hard to try to bring that through, and I work a lot with stories from the perspective of the non-human. And it's a real struggle sometimes. When you're brought up as a scientist, don't anthropomorphize.
Also, I think a lot of storytellers, you know, kind of are wary and think that they might lose their listeners because they won't know what those things are. The whole, you know, the Book of Lost Words and everything.
Mm.
If I go into school in Wolverhampton and start talking about bracken and bilberries, they have no idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I still do it because you sort of, I mean, I've always put words in that I expect children not to understand, because how are they going to learn them if you don't use them, and kind of put the, you know, put the explanations around that. And you can just make it sound, I mean, bracken and bilberries just sound beautiful, don't they? But I think that that is part of it, is that there's the confidence to do that, and that people will actually won't disengage because they don't know the words and they don't know the species, and that the people are frightened that they're going to alienate them from exactly what you're trying to connect them with, because they don't know what it means.
But you don't need a list of species names, do you? You just need, even if it's a turn of a leaf or the way the light hits somewhere, you are starting to represent that environment. And where possible, I think it's also really important to take story outside. Loads and loads of different ways. I mean, I've been exploring with all this stuff. I don't know necessarily the right answers. I do know that fear does come up quite a lot, and I do know that the only way through it is curiosity, and, you know, just wanting to find out and just trying things out. But I think
I have got into big trouble for emptying out bags of leaves for people to stomp through in classrooms.
great. I bet there's some
Cleaners didn't
bugs
like me
still
very much, but we
lurking.
had ever such a lovely time.
Brilliant. This is all really good. This is good. But this kind of stuff really excites me, because it is really experimenting with bringing that diversity back. It's so easy with environmental issues I mean, bloody hell, it's really difficult. It's really tough being an environmentalist right now. One of the places I would love to tell stories is in the once you go into the DEFRA building in Nobel House in London, the civil service, the Department of Environment and Rural Affairs. Once you get past security, which has several layers, you go into this great kind of quadrangle thing with lots of offices all the way around. And I want to tell stories there. There's some people in that department, they've been, you know, working away for many years to desperately try to help the environment. Oh God, stories needed, lots of things there. But yeah, I think this is where it gets exciting, it gets fun. And I think that is the kind of spirit we need to try to bring to these things, as well as tough messages of what's actually going on, which can be difficult to hear.
I think trying to generate love and connection is always a good thing. I think people do need to hear the truth as well, and that's another thing that is very tricky for storytellers, because, and I very much feel this as well, that kind of, I want to get the message out there and I want to be honest, but at the same time, people don't appreciate being preached to.
No,
It's just
I can't stand
no,
it.
I don't either. And yet there's maybe truth that we have to confront. So I've still got a list, you know, when we were sort of having a bit of a chat about all things that we might talk about, there's still quite a lot of things on the list that we have not got to.
It's
But
true.
I did promise everybody that there's been an absolutely fantastic conversation going on in the chat that I've been trying to keep up with as well while we're talking. I mean, it's there's just some brilliant messages on here. But I'm going to ask if there's anything that people desperately want to ask, Lisa. This is your moment now to type it up in the Q&A, and we'll put those to Lisa. While everybody's getting their sort of amazing, triggerly fast typing figures out, I suppose my thing is I've seen some fantastic pieces of environmental art, not just storytelling, but films and visual art, and lots of people exploring that space. And I don't mind being confronted with the truth, but I do find it very difficult when I just come out going, oh God, everything's gonna die and there's nothing I can do anymore. If people will throw me a bit of a lifeline, I find that really helpful. So And it's that thing of maybe people don't want to be told what to do, but actually I think a lot of time they do, and I do. So if I've gone to something like that, if somebody can come up to me at the end and go, you are not helpless, there are things that you can do that aren't too difficult to do, because, you know, nobody wants to be given, like, you know, a trek to the invisible mountain, climbing up a glass thing and leaving their family for 10 years. But 5 simple things that you could do that might make a difference would be really helpful, or even 3.
Only 5.
Well, you could go on more, but I mean, like, well 3
All
is
right,
the storyteller's number, isn't it? But, you know, 5 is good as well.
I'll
But
give you 3
list of
practical things.
Yeah,
I'll
just
give you 3
go out of
practical
here
things.
tonight. You can do this. It will make a difference.
Okay. Thing 1, which I think is deeply radical, very important, and very easy to do, I hope, wherever you live, is every day to make a point of checking in with nature. Make a point of just connecting, make a point of recognizing, spending a little, maybe 5 minutes of curiosity or wonder or observation of nature. I think working that into our daily practice and our daily lives is a really important thing for all of us to do, because if we end up separated from it, it's that much more difficult to get back in. Thing 2, try to buy your food as local as possible, and as much of it locally grown by local cooperatives. Wherever you live, there are things like that set up. If you are lucky enough to live in a circumstance where you can grow your own food, even on a balcony or inside, do that, but don't use peat-based compost. Thing 3, and this is from somebody who has lived and worked in Devon for a long time, which is still quite a pastoral landscape. Don't buy milk unless it's organic, and try to drink less of it. Intensive dairy farming is really grim for the environment. Similarly, if you can, know where as much of your food comes from as possible. Just to give a little bit of food for thought, a typical arable field in England has 17 different applications of pesticide, herbicide, and fungicide every year. That is considered conventional. Last thing.
Which is, you know, more than one, that's basically twice a month through the summer, isn't it?
Yeah. 2 things, actually. Don't give up on voting. Vote, but vote well, and do not vote for environmentally destructive parties. And keep informed, keep smart, keep curious, and keep researching.
That's hard.
It's really tough in already busy lives, but it is empowering. That knowledge is power. You have more choices than you think.
But yeah, keeping informed. I think that the more and more information that gets thrown at us, and that is the thing, is it just gets harder and harder. And actually, I think that is something that we can do through storytellers, because I know I just think about the thought of doing that just makes my toes curl, my heart sink, and my brain fry. But I'm quite good at talking to people who know lots and lots of stuff that I trust, and then I can take that message on.
That's great. That's all you need. It's being curious.
And I suppose that's the thing for me, is remembering that there are different ways to be informed. And if I know that actually one of the most important things for other people to do to be informed is to keep, I don't need to know everything, but to have some things that I can pass on as informed knowledge, I think that is actually a really amazing thing to be able to do. Yeah, Fiona's saying, choose your information, don't doom scroll, listen to lovely environmental storytellers instead.
I like that, Cecilia. Yeah, doom scrolling is it's hellish, isn't it?
Yeah, I get that feeling, literally as being pulled down a plug hole and being stretched into a million pieces and being eaten by rats. Sorry. So Sarah Decker has put a question in the Q&A. Do you find, as I do, that it's a challenge to remember always that we live in a world full of non-human beings? It seems to me that if we can just embody that knowledge in our storytelling as a matter of course, that might just make a difference.
Yes. I think that for storytellers, I think that is the big challenge. It is always being mindful of the non-human, not only in the story, but also in the circumstance that we're telling in. and the connections that are going on with the audience that you're with. It's storytelling in all respects. Storytelling outside is a totally different experience, I think, to storytelling indoors, for example. So it's not just about the story, but that's very important, obviously.
I think I've probably said this before in taking the tradition on, but again, language is so important. And I think, so with traveller stories, they refer to people in family terms. So, you know, kind of you'll meet an old woman on the road and it'd be, oh, grandmother, how are you doing? Or mother, how are you doing? And it's not that, obviously they're not mother or sister or brother. It's a term of respect. And if you look at Native American stories, it's the same. We have Sister Raven, you know, Brother Coyote. And in a lot of the older the cultures are, it's relatively recent that has fallen away. We still have kind of vestiges of it. Like I think most people have got an auntie or an uncle who isn't really an auntie and uncle, but kind of they've been adopted into the family and you give them that title. But it is falling away. And it's, I think if you have that, if you would talk to people as like, you know, kind of, you know, brother wren and sister wren, or kind of, you know, here's brother blackbird singing on a tree, we would kind of look down on that, I think, a lot, and think, well, that's all a bit twee. Oh, but if there's a way that we can bring those relationships back and put them into language shapes our thoughts, it shapes our dreams, it shapes the way that we interpret and interact with the world. And I think that is something that we can do with storytellers. And that's my thing of trying to get the balance between respect and tweeness, because I really don't like twee things. But just shifting our relationship with beings around us, I think, would make a massive, it's got to make a massive impact on how we treat them.
Yeah.
If you think of things that, in the other way around, you know, kind of, that's what we do. When people disrespect women, you're objectifying them. And it is, if you can make someone or something an object, it's much easier to disengage and to hurt them.
Definitely. There's lots of things like this coming up in the chat. Chris has made the important point that, you know, we are working within human community as well. And of course, all of those things intermesh. And I think that's where, again, that connecting in with non-human in your local environment, wherever you are, is really important to do that regularly, so that you are constantly reminding yourself you're part of this bigger network. And all those connections are there. And Kara's made the good point about David Abrams' work, which is really important.
Absolutely agree. Storytellers perhaps can take the place of village elders who teach each other just by mentioning things in their stories. I'm definitely heading towards being the village hag, I think. I find it harder and harder to be nice the older I get. I am just going to be that kind of grumpy old woman who's just, I'm going to be
less nice,
I'm going to be stomping around in wellies that are too big for me, kind of glaring at people. Having said all the things about respect and love, actually, I'm just going to be...
I just want to swear all the time. That's good.
That's going to be grumpy and shaking. So I had an important point I was going to make before I sort of went off on a whole other thing. Yes, so those are the five things. Go outside every day, buy organic milk, keep being an informed, responsible citizen, keep informed, don't doom scroll.
Local food and grow your own food if possible.
Grow your own food in peat-free compost.
Yes, buy locally. However, I would pick you up on, it's not just go outside every day. It's go outside and connect with nature every day. Yeah, and actually, in that respect, it's not just going, oh, there's a tree, see ya. It's actually being out there in it. That's the powerful thing.
So we are going to have to wrap up fairly soon, but Despina's put another question in the Q&A, which is, when we mention animals or plants in the stories, we usually humanize them somehow. Do you think we should avoid that so as to keep things natural and more non-human? And how do you go about that? Descriptions of natural environment, other ideas? I don't have a problem with you humanizing animals or plants personally. You might, Lisa.
I have a problem with anthropomorphizing to the point where you've got otters and water voles wandering around little waistcoats. Struggle a bit with that. And now Anthony Nansen has come up with a really good answer on this one, on anthropomorphism and on honouring nature in an appropriate way. If you think of a kind of continuum where you've got your waistcoat wearing creatures at this one end, and you've maybe got shamanism, shape-shifting, the other end, where
that's where I was heading. I was going
yeah,
with Druid, spirit of the tree, apple tree
human
man.
becoming non-human, that whole thing. That's a really interesting continuum to muse, because you're effectively, I think, looking for as much honouring of that creature or that plant or whatever it is that you're talking about and communicating about as you possibly can, while still acknowledging that, you know what, guess what, you're a human. You can only perceive it the way you can. You can only do as much as you can. You can never quite get to that complete shape-shifting unless there's something I don't know about you, Amy. So I think research and observe and be with as much as you possibly can in getting to know what you're telling about. I think that will help a lot to help you get towards the more honouring end of that continuum, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yes, just to me. I hope it does.
I've probably not honoured Anthony's words very well at all, but that was the answer he gave me to that question a few years ago, and I've always found it very inspiring.
Yeah. I think there was a point when I thought I was the only person in the world who couldn't stand Beatrix Potter.
I quite like it in its own way, but it was,
everybody does. I kind of
for a particular audience, isn't it?
Yes, quite a few people gave my children them and they fell in love with them, and I struggled. I did struggle.
I love Wind in the Willows as well, but you do have to question how they're all they're all Victorian chaps, aren't they, of a certain age and a certain shopping habit. You're like, really? Okay. Anyway,
I'm totally with you on that as well. I'm kind of going, I shouldn't like this. It's the nostalgia thing, isn't it? Because I grew up with it, and it brings everything around. Yes,
and Piper at the Gates of Dawn
are a very different take. And Pauline, I'm sorry to hear that you got stuck indoors for a long time, but it's not too late.
Oh, that's lovely.
I think should have and could have a very disempowering words, and I can and I will are much healthier. Yes, look forward and yeah, just take it from now. And good luck, and I hope you're actually managing to get out a bit more, and I hope things are going better for you. There's one way of getting outside and honouring landscapes, go litter picking. Yes.
There are so many radical things that can be done with nature, even in a big city as well. Lots of guerrilla planting schemes and all kinds of stuff going on. It's great.
Well, and city living is one of those things that actually, environmentally speaking, it's much better. You can be much more green in the city than you can in the countryside. It's really difficult a lot of the time in the countryside. There is no way I could live where I do without a car. It's just
same here. Yeah.
And I'm on oil because of my options. I mean, I have solar and other things as well, but kind of there are choices that you don't have in the countryside that you do have in the city. I mean, it's actually, to go and live in a city can be a really green thing to do, and there are lots of ways that you can plant, and there are lots of green spaces. Certainly in most British cities there are really green spaces. I don't know quite how much that is for other places in the world, but there's always opportunities, because it doesn't have to be a big scale thing, does it? It can just be kind of watching a dandelion grow through cracks in the pavement.
Very much so. And we've got here Wandsworth Common. Yes, fantastic. There's public green space, really important, really, really important.
This has been completely fabulous. Carl, I'm going to be closing this up. I'm finishing this off now because we've overrun again, and I could happily overrun for a lot longer. So Carl, if you want to shove your thing up about Nexus, now is the time. Do it quickly. There are lots of people who are doing amazing things with environmental storytelling. I think there is room for an awful lot more. I think we can be much more radical, and I think that we can be much braver. I think what you were saying about having storytelling festivals as safe spaces to try things out, and to give courage and information and feedback to each other, is really useful, and they could be really inspiring places. But then I think the hard thing and the scary thing is to go out into other places, and obviously especially if you're being invited, but I think we can be quite proactive about it. But that, yeah, I think that can be quite hard and quite scary, which hats off to Carl. Hopefully he's putting up about next to this, which is exactly what that seems to be. It's quite brave and scary and trying new things. Good luck to everybody. I think the tide seems to be turning in lots of ways. I mean, there's so many positive things that are happening now. There are really loads of positive stories, and the conversation seems to be much bigger, even if it's all completely terrifying as well. So
just to say, for those storytellers on the call might be interested, I'm looking at working up some things for the autumn and winter about what you might call rewilding storytelling, and hopefully also getting a gathering together on Dartmoor in the spring of next year to try and support one another, chuck around some ideas, see what has worked, what hasn't, talk about that audience's question, all of that stuff. So yeah, if you're interested, get in touch, drop me a line. You can do that through my website. I can see Carl is relentlessly not wanting to talk about his own amazing sounding piece at Beyond the Border, which I'm very much looking forward to. He keeps coming back to the piece I did earlier in the year called Earth, Water, Fire. Carl, you're very stubborn.
I appreciate this is quite an international audience now, and Beyond the Border has done a lot of work with streaming storytelling, and sadly I don't think Nexus is going to be streamed from Beyond the Border, but I'm kind of been going on about it because I'm hoping that it is going to be.
Here he is.
Carl, when is it going to be streamed online?
Carl's given us a link to follow to find out more about that piece.
I hope that'll be online. Follow, right, so Lisa is on Facebook. You can follow her there, Lisa Schneidau Storyteller. She's also, it's www.lisaschneidau.co.uk. We didn't take the 2 off your thing just because we had a couple of emails you could join on. Get the spellings now, so then you can find it. Buy her books, follow her so that you find out about the workshops in the autumn. I will put the notes up in the Facebook event. And if you've enjoyed tonight, yeah, please do subscribe to Taking the Tradition On. So tonight's been about the environment. There's conversations about all sorts of things, and I am up for suggestions at the moment. This is the last in the current series. I'm going to be taking a break till the autumn. I'm having discussions with my patrons about what they would like to hear, but let me know generally, what do you think the new series should be? This is quite a little niche space. I do focus on traditional oral storytelling. Quite happy to expand out into other areas, but it is mostly to do with storytelling.
It is a fine thing, Amy, you're doing. It's brilliant. Thank you.
Like I say, this is my little selfish passion place.
Very good.
I love storytelling, and it's chance for storytellers to tell their stories. Really, quite often we come with a finished project, but there's so much work and nitty-gritty that goes into coming up with the final story. This is where we can talk about those stories, the stories of the storytellers. Yes, so you can join my Patreon site. You can follow me, Amy Douglas Storyteller, on Facebook and Instagram. And I think those are the details that they need at the end. And I'm just going to say thank you so much for all of your amazing contributions on the chat. There's just some amazing comments. I'm going to sit down with a glass of wine and read through this properly now, because I was skimming the comments and trying to keep hold of both conversations. I've really enjoyed and appreciated just actually the wisdom that is in the room tonight and all of the thoughts. So thank you to everyone, but of course particularly to my fantastic guest, Lisa Schneidau. So big hands up to Lisa. Woo!
That's a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me along.